The last city, the final bastion of humanity, stood tall amidst the apocalyptic wasteland. Towering walls and fortified barricades were the only things separating the survivors from the endless hordes of undead that roamed the outside world. Inside the city, life was a delicate balance between survival and despair. The once thriving metropolis now resembled a fortress, with its population reduced to a handful of survivors who fought daily against the growing threat of extinction. Sarah, a battle-hardened leader of the city's defense, stood at the perimeter of the city, her eyes scanning the horizon. The sun was setting, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. She could hear the distant growls of the undead, a constant reminder that they were always watching, always waiting. Every day felt like a countdown, as the walls of the city grew weaker and the zombie hordes grew stronger. "Captain, the defenses are ready," reported Alex, her trusted second-in-command. He stood beside her, his hand gripping the rifle slung over his shoulder. His face was marked by exhaustion, but his determination was unwavering. "But we need to be prepared for something worse tonight." Sarah nodded solemnly. She had seen the change in the zombies lately. They were becoming more organized, more aggressive. The mindless hordes were now moving with purpose, their attacks more coordinated than ever before. It was as if they had evolved, adapted to the city's defenses, and were learning how to breach them. The city had always relied on its walls, its weapons, and the strength of its defenders. But the truth was, they were running out of time. The resources were dwindling, and the last of the supplies would soon be gone. The survivors had no choice but to fight, to stand their ground, and to hold on to the one thing they had left, hope. As night fell, the air grew thick with tension. The defenders manned their posts, their eyes darting between the barricades and the ever-growing darkness. It was then that Sarah noticed something strange in the distance. A figure, moving unnaturally fast, darting between the ruins of a nearby building. It wasn't a regular zombie, it was too fast, too precise. "Alex, look at that," Sarah muttered, her voice tense. "That's not normal." Alex squinted, following her gaze. "What the hell is that?" Before he could answer, a distant roar echoed across the landscape, followed by a cacophony of shuffling feet. The ground trembled as the horde began to move in. But this time, they weren't just approaching, they were charging, and they were different. They weren't the shambling, mindless creatures that the city had been used to. These were faster, stronger, and more organized. "We need to get ready," Sarah ordered, her voice sharp. "Now." The defenders rushed into position, their weapons ready. Sarah and Alex made their way to the central command post, where a large screen displayed the city's surveillance footage. The camera feed was littered with static, but one thing was clear, the zombies were not acting like they used to. "They've been adapting," Sarah said, her voice laced with dread. "They've learned how to move faster. They've learned how to attack with more coordination." "Then we need to adapt too," Alex replied, his eyes narrowing. "We can't let them take the city. Not after everything we've fought for." The sound of the undead grew louder as they neared the city's gates. The defenders could hear their groans and growls, their footsteps growing closer with every passing second. Sarah felt a pit form in her stomach. They had no idea what they were about to face. "We need to hold the line, no matter what," Sarah said, turning to face the defenders. "Tonight, we fight for the last chance humanity has. If we fall, the rest of the world falls with us." Alex gave a nod of agreement, his eyes flashing with the fire of determination. "We won't let that happen." As the first wave of zombies collided with the city's walls, the ground shook. The fight for the last city had begun. And Sarah knew, deep down, that this would be a battle like no other. They had no choice but to win, or humanity would be wiped out forever. The gates of the city rattled under the weight of the undead assault, the sound of gnashing teeth and heavy breaths reverberating through the walls. The defenders held their breath, waiting for the first breach. And as the undead surged forward, Sarah felt a surge of adrenaline. Tonight, she would fight for her people, and she would fight for the future of humanity. The gates of the last city trembled violently under the relentless assault of the undead. Sarah stood at the command post, watching the screens flicker as waves of zombies slammed against the reinforced walls. The defenders, armed with rifles and crossbows, took positions along the walls, each one aware that their lives depended on their ability to hold the line. The sound of gunfire rang out, breaking the night air as they fired upon the oncoming horde. But Sarah's mind wasn't on the chaos outside. Her eyes were fixed on the screens. She had noticed something that didn't sit right, something she couldn't ignore. The zombies weren't just attacking blindly, they were organizing. A group of them was moving together with a clear purpose, guiding the others like a predator leading its pack. This wasn't just a horde anymore. There was something else out there, something far more dangerous than the mindless masses they had grown accustomed to. "Alex, come here," Sarah called out, her voice tense. Alex immediately appeared at her side, his brow furrowed in confusion. He followed her gaze to the monitor showing a group of zombies moving in a tight formation. "What are they doing?" "That's not random," Alex muttered, squinting at the screen. "They're coordinating. Like they know what they're doing." Sarah clenched her fists. "I've seen it before, but never like this. This is something new." She turned away from the screens and grabbed her jacket, pulling it tight against the night's chill. "We need to get out there. Now." Alex nodded, his face grim. "I'll rally the others. Let's go." As Sarah and Alex made their way to the outer perimeter, the tension in the air was palpable. The defenders were still firing at the zombies attacking the walls, but there was a sense of uncertainty now. The usual tactics, shoot, reload, repeat, no longer seemed effective. The zombies were evolving faster than anyone had anticipated. They were learning, adapting, and growing more intelligent with every passing moment. When Sarah reached the front lines, she immediately ordered the defenders to fall back to a safer position. "We need to regroup and reassess. This isn't just a random attack anymore." One of the sharpshooters, a young man named Ryan, approached Sarah. His face was pale, his hands shaking as he wiped sweat from his forehead. "Captain, I saw something. There's one zombie in the front. It was different from the rest." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Different? How?" Ryan swallowed hard before continuing. It was leading them. It was faster than the others, and it had a different look, like it wasn't fully turned. It still had a trace of humanity in its eyes. The hairs on the back of Sarah's neck stood up. She knew what that meant, what it could mean. "We're dealing with something new. We have to take it out before it becomes a bigger problem." She motioned for Alex and Ryan to follow her as they made their way through the darkened streets. The horde was still relentlessly pressing against the city's defenses, but Sarah's focus was on finding this new enemy. She had to know what they were up against. The last city had already been pushed to its breaking point, and a new, more intelligent breed of zombie could be the final nail in the coffin. As they moved deeper into the city, the silence was eerie. The streets, once bustling with life, were now deserted, save for the sounds of distant groans and the occasional rustle in the shadows. The trio moved cautiously, weapons drawn, as they approached an old church at the edge of town. It was an ideal spot for an ambush, abandoned, dark, and filled with hiding places. Sarah motioned for them to stop. "Listen," she whispered. There, in the distance, they could hear the faint sound of footsteps, not the shuffling of zombies, but the distinct click of boots against pavement. "They're here," Sarah muttered, her voice tight with urgency. "And they're not alone." Before they could react, a figure stepped out from the shadows. It was tall, hunched, but unmistakably human. At least, it had been once. The figure's face was partially obscured by a torn hood, but the eyes, those eyes, were not like any zombie Sarah had ever seen. They were aware, calculating. A predator's gaze. For a moment, Sarah froze, caught off guard by the sight. The figure stepped forward, revealing a massive scar running across its cheek, a mark of some past trauma. But what caught her attention more than anything was the strange, fluid movement of the creature. It wasn't stumbling or shuffling, it was walking with purpose, every step measured, every motion deliberate. "Captain," Alex warned, his voice low and urgent. "That's not one of them. That's something else." The creature took another step closer, its mouth opening slightly. In a raspy, guttural voice, it spoke. "You're too late," it hissed. "We are not like the others. We evolve." The last city was no longer safe. Something far worse was now on the horizon. And Sarah knew they had just made their first contact with the enemy's true leader. The air around Sarah seemed to freeze as the figure before her spoke. The words hung in the air, filled with ominous certainty. "We evolve." The voice was deep, guttural, as though it had to fight through the creature's deteriorating throat. Sarah instinctively raised her rifle, but Alex's hand shot out to stop her. "Hold on," he whispered. "We need to understand what we're dealing with first." The creature before them was nothing like the mindless zombies that had battered against the city's walls for years. This one moved with purpose, its eyes, fiercely intelligent, locked onto Sarah with an unsettling focus. It wasn't just a zombie. It was something else. "Who are you?" Sarah demanded, her voice steady but laced with suspicion. The figure tilted its head, as if considering her words, then let out a low laugh that echoed eerily in the quiet street. "We are the next step in evolution. What you call zombies are just the beginning. What you have seen, what you fought, that's nothing." The creature took another slow step forward, its gaze never leaving Sarah's. "We are not like them. We have learned, we have adapted. And now, we lead." Sarah's grip on her rifle tightened, but she didn't fire. Not yet. This was unlike any threat she'd faced. This creature was too intelligent, too aware. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice steady despite the rising tension in her chest. The creature's lips curled into a semblance of a grin, revealing rows of sharp teeth. "What do we want? We want what you have, your city. Your shelter. Your resources. And most importantly, your future. The last of humanity will fall to us. We will evolve, and we will reign." It stepped closer, moving with unnatural grace. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't afraid. In fact, it seemed almost confident. Like it knew it had already won. Then why wait? Alex shot out, stepping forward. "If you can wipe us out so easily, what's stopping you?" The creature's eyes glinted with a malicious gleam. "Because, Alex, you don't understand. We don't just want to destroy you. No. We want to see you fight. We want you to struggle. We want you to watch as everything you've fought for crumbles beneath our feet. We want you to know, there is no escape." Sarah's heart raced. Every word this creature spoke sent chills through her. It wasn't just a monster, it was a strategist. It was playing a game, and the rules were changing in ways she didn't fully understand. "We won't just roll over," Sarah said, her voice firm as she squared her shoulders. "We will fight. No matter what you throw at us, we will fight." The creature laughed again, a chilling sound that echoed through the empty streets. "Fight? Yes, that's what makes this so interesting. You think you can win? You are already too late." It paused, as if savoring the moment, and then gestured behind it. Sarah's eyes followed its movement. The street was filled with figures emerging from the shadows. More of the new breed, each one moving in perfect unison. They weren't like the usual slow-moving zombies that had plagued the survivors. These creatures were fast, coordinated, and intelligent. They were an army. And they were getting closer. "They're organized," Alex whispered, his voice laced with disbelief. "They're working together." "Exactly," the creature replied with an eerie smile. "You'll understand soon enough. We aren't just mindless drones anymore. We are superior." Sarah's mind raced. They couldn't hold the city forever if the undead were now capable of strategy. They needed something more than weapons, they needed to understand this new threat before it wiped them out. "Alex, we need to get back to the command center." "We need to warn the others," Sarah said urgently, never taking her eyes off the approaching horde. "Now." As they turned to retreat, Sarah felt a surge of dread course through her. The last city had always been a symbol of hope, or refuge from the apocalypse. But now, for the first time since the outbreak, she questioned whether they had any chance of survival. Behind them, the creature's voice echoed through the streets. "This is only the beginning. The last city will fall. And when it does, we will come for the rest of the world." As Sarah and Alex made their way back to the city's command center, the full weight of their situation settled over them. The enemy they faced was unlike anything they had ever encountered. No longer just a mindless swarm, the zombies had evolved into something far more dangerous, a force that had learned, adapted, and was now ready to claim what was left of humanity. The fight for survival had just taken a terrifying turn. And Sarah knew that they were facing an enemy with one clear advantage: they were no longer just fighting to survive, they were fighting to defeat an enemy that had already won in its own twisted way. In this part, the true nature of the new breed of zombies is revealed. The command center was buzzing with activity as Sarah and Alex burst through the doors, their faces grim. The atmosphere inside had shifted. The usual sense of determination among the survivors was now tempered with an unsettling fear. People hurried about, checking supplies, adjusting equipment, and talking in hushed voices. But as soon as Sarah entered, the room fell silent. "We've got a problem," Sarah said, her voice commanding as she moved to the central table. "The zombies, what we thought were just mindless hordes, they've evolved. They're learning, adapting. They're coordinated, and they have a leader." A murmur ran through the room, and all eyes turned to Sarah. She could feel the weight of their fear, but she had to push forward. This wasn't the time for panic, it was time for action. "What do you mean, evolved?" Ryan, one of the youngest survivors, asked, his voice trembling slightly. Sarah took a deep breath. "They're not just attacking randomly anymore. They're organized. We've encountered one, something more than just a zombie. It's fast, it's calculating, and it's leading them. It spoke to us, and it's clear that it's not like the others." Alex added, his voice firm, "It told us it was just the beginning. That they want the city, and once they have it, they'll move on to the rest of the world." The room went cold. People exchanged worried glances, but Sarah could see the resolve starting to form in their eyes. They had always known that the zombies were a growing threat, but this was something completely different. It was no longer just about holding the city, it was about survival on a scale they had never imagined. "Are we just going to sit here and wait for them to come?" Maya, one of the experienced fighters, asked, her eyes flashing with defiance. "No," Sarah replied immediately. "We're going to fight back. But we need to be smarter. This isn't just about weapons anymore. We need to outthink them, outmaneuver them." "But we don't even know how to stop them," Alex interjected, frustration evident in his voice. "If they're evolving this fast, how do we even begin to fight something like that?" Sarah's gaze hardened. "We learn from them. We figure out what makes them tick. We study their movements, their patterns. We need to understand this new enemy if we're going to have any chance of survival." She turned to the wall of monitors, where a map of the city was displayed, showing the locations of various defenses and hot spots. "The new breed is targeting key areas of the city. We need to reinforce those positions, but we can't just rely on brute force. We need to create traps, lead them into ambushes. We need to think like they do." There was a moment of silence as everyone processed what Sarah was saying. For the first time, they realized that they weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for the future of humanity itself. The city was their last stronghold, and if it fell, so would the last hope for rebuilding. Ryan, who had been standing in the back, spoke up again, his voice a little steadier this time. "I've been thinking about the creature you encountered. If it's truly the leader, then it's likely controlling the others. If we can take it out." Sarah nodded. "That's exactly what we need to do. But it won't be easy. It's not just a zombie. It's something else, something smarter. We'll need a team, a plan, and most importantly, surprise." We'll need to find its weak spots, Alex said, stepping forward with renewed purpose. And once we do, we'll hit it hard. We don't have much time, Sarah said, looking at the clock on the wall. The horde is already at the gates. If we don't act now, we won't have another chance. The team quickly began to divide tasks. Some would focus on fortifying the city's defenses, while others would prepare for the risky operation to take out the leader of the new breed. The tension in the room was palpable, but there was a new sense of unity, a collective determination to survive. Sarah moved to the map, her finger tracing the various lines of defense. We know the leader is targeting the power grid next. If it takes out the city's power, we'll be blind and vulnerable. That's our window. We'll make our move then. But as Sarah studied the map, a chilling thought crossed her mind. They were playing a dangerous game. The creatures were intelligent, too intelligent for the usual tactics to work. It wasn't just about brute force anymore. They were facing an enemy that could anticipate their every move, just as they were trying to anticipate its. And then there was the terrifying reality: if they failed, the city wouldn't just fall. It would be the end of everything. She turned to the others, her eyes filled with quiet resolve. We have one shot at this. One chance to stop them. If we don't succeed, we're done. The room was silent again, but this time the silence wasn't filled with fear. It was filled with determination. They would fight. They would do whatever it took to protect the last city, and the last hope for humanity's survival. In this part, the survivors begin to prepare for the next phase of their struggle, with a renewed sense of purpose and determination. The tension builds as they realize just how smart and organized the new breed of zombies are. Their only hope now lies in understanding and outsmarting the enemy, setting the stage for a dangerous. The night had settled over the last city like a heavy blanket. The usual sounds of survival, distant gunshots, the clanging of metal, the hum of generators, had quieted, leaving behind an eerie stillness. Inside the command center, Sarah stood by the large map on the wall, her finger tracing the carefully laid plans for tomorrow's operation. It felt surreal. Tomorrow, they would either stop the new breed of zombies or lose everything. How are the preparations going? She asked, her voice cutting through the silence. Alex was standing near the equipment table, checking his rifle for the 100th time. Everything's ready, he said, though his eyes didn't quite meet hers. He was tense, and Sarah could tell he was carrying the weight of what was to come. Maya walked in from the other room, her face grim. The perimeter's been reinforced. We've got guards in position, and we've set up a few surprise traps near the power grid. It'll be tricky, but it should buy us some time. Sarah nodded, her mind racing with scenarios. Good. But we can't afford any mistakes tomorrow. The new breed is smarter than we are. They're expecting us to come at them head-on, and if we do, we're done. We'll do it differently, Maya said, her voice steady. We'll go in fast, strike hard, and get out before they even know what hit them. Sarah appreciated Maya's confidence. The team needed it. But deep down, Sarah knew that no plan was perfect. They were walking into the unknown. Every step they took was a gamble, a risk that could either lead to victory or their demise. As Sarah turned back to the map, she felt a tap on her shoulder. She looked over to see Ryan, the youngest of the group, holding out a bottle of water. You okay? He asked quietly, his youthful face filled with concern. Sarah forced a smile, taking the water from him. I'm fine, Ryan. Just thinking. You've got a lot on your shoulders, Ryan said. But we all trust you. We know you'll lead us through this. Sarah didn't respond immediately. She had to be strong for them, for the city. But inside, she was unsure. She was their leader, their hope, but sometimes, that felt like the heaviest burden of all. Thanks, Ryan, she said after a pause. But we're in this together. All of us. There was a long silence before Alex spoke again, his voice quieter this time. Sarah, do you really think we can do this? I mean, they're smarter than we are. If they know what we're planning. They don't know, Sarah interrupted, her voice firm. We have the element of surprise. They think they're in control, but they're wrong. They think we're just going to defend the city. But we're not. We're going to hit them where it hurts, and we're going to make sure they know we're not afraid. Alex met her gaze, searching her face. After a moment, he nodded, though doubt still flickered in his eyes. I hope you're right. We all hope I'm right, Sarah replied softly. But hope doesn't win battles. Action does. And tomorrow, we act. As the team gathered around the central table, Sarah could feel the tension in the air, thick as smoke. It was the calm before the storm, the quiet before the chaos. Everyone knew what was at stake. The city, their home, was on the line. And they were the last line of defense. Ryan was the first to break the silence. You said we need to study them. Figure out what makes them tick. Do you think we're ready? I don't know, Sarah said honestly. But what other choice do we have? We fight or we die. And I don't intend to die without a fight. There was a small but determined murmur of agreement from the others. No one here was willing to give up, no matter how impossible the odds seemed. Tomorrow, Maya said, her tone filled with finality. We do this tomorrow, or we don't do it at all. The room fell into a heavy silence as the weight of her words sank in. There was no going back now. Tomorrow would decide everything. Either they'd win, or they'd fall. The new breed would overrun the city, and with it, the last remnants of human civilization. Sarah took a deep breath, then exhaled slowly. All right. We get some rest tonight, and we move out at first light. The fate of this city, and humanity, is in our hands. We fight to win. No more hesitation. No more fear. With that, the team dispersed to their stations. But Sarah stayed behind, staring at the map, her thoughts consumed by the battle ahead. A sudden noise from behind her broke her focus. Alex had returned, holding a small, faded photo in his hand. He didn't speak, but Sarah knew what it was, the picture of his family, the ones he had lost when the outbreak began. Alex walked over and silently placed the photo on the table in front of her. It was a simple gesture, but one that spoke volumes. They all had something to fight for. And now, they had to make sure they didn't lose it. As Sarah looked at the photo, the weight of responsibility settled back on her shoulders. She couldn't afford to fail. Not for herself. Not for Alex. Not for anyone. They were the last hope. And tomorrow, they would prove it. In this part, the tension escalates as the survivors prepare for the battle ahead. The quiet before the storm amplifies their nerves and uncertainty, but also strengthens their resolve. As they face what could be their final mission, they rely on each other for strength, knowing the fate of humanity rests on their shoulders. The first light of dawn filtered through the cracks in the city's broken walls, casting a pale, gray hue over the ruined streets. The air was thick with the scent of dust and decay, but the survivors gathered in the command center, ready for the fight of their lives. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the room as Sarah looked around at the faces of her team. Everyone was ready, but the tension was palpable. There was no turning back now. All right, Sarah said, her voice firm. This is it. We move out in 10 minutes. Stick to the plan, stay sharp, and don't take any unnecessary risks. Alex gave her a determined nod, adjusting the straps on his backpack. Maya was already in full combat gear, checking her weapons one last time. Ryan, though still young, looked resolute, his eyes focused. They were all in this together. Sarah turned to the large map on the wall, pointing to the power grid location. We'll split into 2 teams. Team 1 will head for the power grid. We need to keep it from going offline, or this whole plan falls apart. Team 2 will stay behind as backup, holding the defensive lines. Remember, the new breed will be watching our every move. Don't give them a chance to outsmart us. The team nodded, each person understanding their role. As the clock ticked down, Sarah's mind raced. She knew that this was their best shot, but there was so much unknown. The new breed of zombies were no longer mindless creatures. They were organized, intelligent, and deadly. They could anticipate their movements, and the leader, the creature they had encountered, was still out there, waiting. She couldn't shake the image of it. Its eyes had been cold, calculating, not the vacant stare of the mindless zombies they had faced before. It had spoken, and in those few moments, Sarah had realized something far more terrifying. This wasn't just a battle for survival, it was a war for the future of humanity. "Let's go," Sarah ordered, and with that, the team moved out. The streets of the city were eerily quiet as they made their way to the outskirts. The usual noises, the sounds of distant survival, the scattered cries of the undead, were muted, replaced by a sense of dread that hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. "Stay alert," Maya whispered as they rounded a corner. She motioned for the group to slow down, her hand raised to signal for caution. They moved like shadows, their footsteps muffled by the crumbling ruins around them. Every corner they turned felt like it could be their last, every shadow held the potential for an ambush. The silence was deafening, the calm before the chaos. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, but she pushed the fear down, focusing on the mission ahead. They reached the power grid within an hour, the building looming ahead of them like a dark fortress. Sarah held up a hand, signaling for the team to stop. She peered around the corner, scanning the area for any sign of movement. The power grid was surrounded by a series of fences and gates, the wires buzzing with electricity. But it was too quiet. There was no sign of the zombies. No movement, no sounds, nothing. "Something's wrong," Sarah muttered, her instincts kicking into high gear. "Maybe they're waiting for us," Alex suggested, his grip tightening on his rifle. "Possibly," Sarah replied, eyes narrowing as she scanned the perimeter. "Keep your guard up. We're going in." The team crept forward, weapons raised, their every step careful and deliberate. The power grid was the key to their plan. If it went offline, the city would be defenseless. They had to protect it at all costs. As they reached the main gate, a sudden noise shattered the stillness, a loud crash, followed by the unmistakable shuffle of footsteps. The zombies were here. "Get down!" Sarah shouted, pulling the team behind the nearest cover. A horde of the mindless zombies stumbled into view, their eyes glazed, their mouths hanging open in a grotesque imitation of hunger. They were swarming the power grid, but something was different about them. They weren't just attacking randomly, they were following a pattern, as if they were being directed. "That's it," Sarah whispered, realization dawning on her. "They're being controlled. The leader is out there somewhere." Alex was already positioning himself to take a shot, but Sarah held up a hand. "No. Don't engage yet. We need to wait for the signal." The zombies drew closer, their growls and moans filling the air as they shuffled toward the grid. Sarah's heart raced. They had expected a fight, but they hadn't anticipated this level of coordination. The creatures were organized, like soldiers in formation, moving together with a purpose. In the distance, through the haze of movement, Sarah saw it. The leader. It stood at the edge of the horde, watching them with cold, calculating eyes. It wasn't like the others. It moved with precision, its gaze sharp, intelligent. And it knew they were there. "Now," Sarah commanded, her voice low but urgent. Maya and Alex opened fire, their shots precise and deadly. But the zombies were relentless, pushing forward in waves, their numbers overwhelming. "Hold the line," Sarah shouted. "We need to take that thing down." But as the battle raged around them, Sarah realized with growing dread that the leader was waiting for them to make a move. It wasn't just attacking, it was watching, studying them. And that gave it a terrifying advantage. The fight had begun, but Sarah knew this was just the first of many battles. The new breed wasn't just about survival. It was about domination. And if they didn't stop it now, humanity might never get another chance. The battle raged around Sarah and her team, the clash of metal and the crack of gunfire filling the air. Despite the overwhelming numbers of the zombie horde, the survivors held their ground, firing relentlessly, their weapons echoing in the ruins of the city. But even as they pushed back the waves of undead, a creeping sense of unease settled over Sarah. It wasn't the horde that worried her, it was the leader. The leader zombie stood at the edge of the chaos, barely moving but always watching, its cold eyes fixed on the defenders. It was the strategist behind the attack, calculating their every move, and Sarah knew it was only a matter of time before it made its move. Every instinct in her screamed that they were walking into a trap. "We need to take it out, now," Maya shouted over the noise of the fight. She was crouched behind a destroyed car, her rifle aimed at a distant zombie, but her eyes kept flicking back to the leader. "I know," Sarah replied, her voice tight with tension. "But it's too well guarded. We can't just charge in there without a plan." Alex, crouched beside Sarah, was scanning the battlefield, his eyes narrowing as he picked out targets. "We could create a diversion. Draw the leader out. But we'd need to be quick, he won't fall for it for long." Sarah weighed the options. It was risky. Too risky. But standing here and doing nothing wasn't an option either. They couldn't allow this creature to continue watching, controlling the horde. If it remained alive, it would only get stronger, smarter. And soon, they'd be outmatched. "All right, here's the plan," Sarah said, her voice low but commanding. "Alex, Maya, create a distraction on the far side. Draw the horde's attention. I'll take Ryan and flank the leader." Maya nodded quickly, already moving into position. She was the first to make a move, firing a shot at a group of zombies on the opposite side of the grid. The horde turned, its focus momentarily diverted. "Now, Ryan," Sarah whispered, motioning for him to follow. He was already looking a little pale, but his determination showed through. As they sprinted towards the shadows of the ruined buildings, the world seemed to slow around Sarah. She could hear the thumping of her heartbeat, the rush of blood in her ears, and the rising tension in the air as the plan unfolded. The leader zombie, still standing at the edge of the fight, hadn't moved. It knew something was wrong, it could sense the shift in the battlefield. But it wasn't attacking. It was waiting. Waiting for them to make the next move. They reached the alleyway near the leader, their movements swift and silent. They had to stay out of sight for as long as possible. If the leader saw them before they were in position, the whole plan would fail. Ryan, his face set in a determined mask, kept pace with Sarah as they crept closer to their target. They could see the leader now, its expression eerily calm amidst the chaos, its eyes scanning the area like a predator searching for its prey. "Ready?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. Ryan nodded, gripping his weapon tightly. He was young, but he had proven himself time and time again during the chaos of the past few days. He was ready for this, ready for whatever came next. But before Sarah could make her move, the leader's head snapped to the side, its gaze locking onto hers. It knew they were there. "Damn it," Sarah cursed under her breath. They had been spotted. With terrifying precision, the leader stepped forward, its movements deliberate. The zombies around it seemed to fall into a rhythm, shifting with a coordinated grace as though they were mere extensions of the leader's will. The horde, still distracted by Maya and Alex, didn't notice the change, didn't see the way the leader's presence altered everything. It was as if the horde was waiting for the signal, and now, it had arrived. In a split second, the leader surged forward, moving towards Sarah and Ryan with unnatural speed. It wasn't just a mindless creature, it was a force, a being with purpose. "Ryan, move!" Sarah shouted, grabbing his arm and pulling him back. But it was too late. The leader lunged, its eyes blazing with an intelligence that sent chills down Sarah's spine. She pushed Ryan out of the way just in time, but the leader's claws scraped across her arm, leaving a searing pain in their wake. The leader's mouth opened wide, its teeth snapping inches from Sarah's face. With a grunt, Sarah threw herself to the side, narrowly avoiding the leader's next strike. She fired a round into its chest, but it didn't flinch. It didn't even slow down. "This thing is stronger than I thought," Sarah muttered, scrambling to regain her footing. Ryan, shaken but undeterred, fired a shot at the leader's head, but the creature was faster than they anticipated. It dodged with eerie precision, its eyes never leaving them. "Get down!" Maya's voice rang out from across the battlefield. She had seen what was happening and was already moving to assist. but the leader was too focused. It wasn't letting them escape. Sarah realized then that they weren't just fighting a monster. They were facing an opponent who understood tactics, who understood fear. The leader wasn't just a creature to kill, it was a mind to outwit. "Alex, Maya, now!" Sarah shouted, her voice filled with urgency. In an instant, both Alex and Maya sprang into action, drawing the attention of the horde with an explosion of gunfire. The leader momentarily hesitated, looking back, as if assessing the new threat. But that hesitation was enough. Sarah grabbed Ryan by the arm, pulling him to his feet. "Let's finish this." The city, once a place of life and hope, now felt like a graveyard. The ruins echoed with the sounds of battle, the crack of gunfire, the screams of the dying, the guttural growls of the undead. But amid the chaos, Sarah knew this wasn't just a fight for survival. It was the final stand. The last stand for humanity, for everything they had fought for. The leader of the new breed of zombies was relentless, its cold, calculating gaze locked on Sarah and her team. It knew they were a threat, and it wasn't going to let them walk away. The battle had shifted, and now, it was all or nothing. Sarah stood with her back against the crumbling remnants of a building, her breath shallow, her heart pounding. Ryan was by her side, panting, his eyes wide with fear but filled with determination. Maya and Alex had regrouped, their weapons raised, ready to engage once more. But Sarah knew time was running out. They were outnumbered, and the leader was stronger than any of them had anticipated. "It's now or never," Sarah muttered, her voice tight with resolve. "We need to take down the leader, or this will all be for nothing." Maya nodded grimly, adjusting her grip on her rifle. "We've got one shot at this. Let's make it count." The leader was still moving with unnerving precision, its eyes scanning the battlefield, never wavering, always calculating. It was a predator, and they were its prey. But Sarah had a plan, and she hoped it would be enough. "Alex, you're with me," she said, her voice steady. "Maya, Ryan, hold the line. Keep the horde back. We need to draw its attention." Alex nodded, already moving into position. He was the quickest of them, and he knew how to move silently, how to get into the right spot at the right time. Sarah and Alex crept toward the leader, keeping low to the ground, their steps muffled by the debris that littered the street. They moved like shadows, using the wreckage of the city to conceal their movements. The leader hadn't noticed them yet, still focused on the others. "We have one shot at this," Alex whispered as they neared the leader's flank. "If we miss, it's over." "I know," Sarah said, her voice barely audible. Her mind was racing, weighing every possibility. There was no room for error. They couldn't afford to hesitate, not now. At the same time, Maya and Ryan opened fire, the loud crack of their rifles piercing the silence. The horde immediately responded, turning toward them with hunger and rage. Zombies charged forward, their growls mixing with the sound of gunfire as Maya and Ryan took aim, keeping the undead at bay. But Sarah's attention was on the leader. The creature turned slightly, as if sensing the distraction, but it didn't engage just yet. It was waiting. Watching. It knew that the final strike was coming. "Now, Alex!" Sarah shouted. In a swift motion, Alex lunged from his cover, taking the leader by surprise. He aimed for its neck, but the leader reacted instantly, swiping at him with a speed that was almost unnatural. Alex barely dodged, but the leader's claws grazed his shoulder, ripping through the fabric of his jacket. "Alex!" Sarah yelled, but there was no time for hesitation. She had to act now. With everything she had, Sarah surged forward, her weapon raised. The leader's eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. The creature's expression was eerily calm, as if it knew it had already won. But Sarah wasn't going down without a fight. She fired. The shot rang out, and the leader's head jerked back as the bullet tore through its skull. For a split second, it seemed like the world had paused, the chaos of the battle fading into silence. But then, to Sarah's horror, the leader didn't fall. It stumbled back, clutching its head, but its eyes, those cold, intelligent eyes, never wavered. It wasn't dead. Not yet. Shoot again, Maya shouted from across the battlefield. Sarah reloaded in a blur, her hands shaking as she aimed once more at the leader's head. This time, there was no hesitation. She fired again, the bullet piercing the creature's skull with a sickening crack. The leader staggered back, its body twitching as if it were struggling to remain upright. For a moment, there was stillness. And then, with a final, monstrous growl, the leader collapsed to the ground, its lifeless body crumpling in the dust. The horde paused. The survivors stood in stunned silence, their eyes locked on the fallen leader. It was over. The heart of the new breed was gone, and with it, the organization that had made them so deadly. But even as they celebrated their victory, they knew the battle was far from over. The horde would still be a threat. The fight for humanity's survival would continue. The city might be safe, for now, but the world outside was still filled with danger. "We've won this round," Sarah said, her voice hoarse but filled with relief. "But we're not done yet. Not by a long shot." As they made their way back to the heart of the city, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The leader was gone, but the war for humanity's future was far from over. And she would be ready. In this final part, Sarah and her team faced their most dangerous adversary, the leader of the new breed of zombies. The battle is intense, filled with suspense and uncertainty, but through strategy, determination, and sheer willpower, the survivors defeat the leader, signaling a temporary victory. However, Sarah knows that this is just one battle in a much larger war, and the true fight for humanity's survival has only just begun. 2 of 2.